The sound of rain against the tin roof carried through the narrow streets of Atlanta's South Side. Inside the small auto shop, Elias Carter's hands were blackened with oil, the scent of motor grease and old metal clinging to his clothes. For 30 years he had worked beneath the same humming fluorescent lights, fixing engines, patching brakes, and pretending the silence didn't hurt as much as it used to. The phone on his desk buzzed. He wiped his hands on a rag before answering. "Yeah, Dad." The voice on the other end was sharp, impatient. "I need 10 grand. Today." Elias froze the wrench slipping from his fingers. "Malik, it's the 1st of the month. You already got your allowance." "That was rent, not life." Malik's tone dripped with frustration. "You think I can build anything on the scraps you give me?" Elias leaned against the workbench, staring at the photo taped above it, his son at 15, smiling beside his mother's old Buick. "You don't need more money," he said slowly. "You need a plan." There was a pause, then a laugh low and bitter. "A plan. Like yours. Work yourself to death, just to prove to white folks you ain't lazy." "No thanks, Dad. I'm not living that way." Elias felt the words like a knife. "I worked so you wouldn't have to start at the bottom, Malik. So you could walk into any room and hold your head up high. Hold my head up where, in a world that already decided I don't belong." Malik's voice rose. "You think that uniform you wore made them respect you? You were just their token black soldier." A man who followed orders and smiled for the photo. Silence filled the line, heavy and cold. Elias stared at the scars across his knuckles, the ones he'd earned defending a country that had once denied his right to vote. "You weren't there," he said quietly. "You don't know what it took to survive." "And you don't know what it's like to live now," Malik snapped. "To walk down a street where cops still see your skin before your face." The call ended with a click that sounded like a door slamming shut. Elias stood there for a long time, listening to the hum of the lights. Outside, thunder rolled over the city, deep distant, like the sound of something old waking up. He sank into his chair, the leather cracked and worn from decades of use, and let the anger drain into exhaustion. He thought of his wife, Lorraine, the way she used to calm Malik when he was small, the way she'd whisper, "Don't raise him to be afraid, Eli. Raise him to be kind." But Lorraine had been gone for 15 years, and kindness was harder to hold on to in a world that rewarded anger. By the time he locked up the shop, the rain had stopped leaving puddles that mirrored the glow of the streetlights. His neighborhood had changed gentrified coffee shops, where barber shops used to be white joggers, moving through streets that once felt like home. He climbed into his truck, the seat squeaking beneath him, and sat there staring at the steering wheel. He didn't fear dying alone. He feared living long enough to watch his son become a stranger. At home, the answering machine blinked with a new message. He pressed play. Malik's voice again, softer this time. "Dad, look, maybe we should talk. I was out of line earlier. I got a weekend off. Thought maybe we could go camping like we used to. You still got those tents, right?" Elias frowned. "Camping?" Malik hadn't been near the woods since he was 12. "You serious about that?" he muttered to himself. On the recording, Malik's voice forced a small laugh. "Come on, old man. Let's hit the mountains. Just you and me. Maybe that's what we need to remember we're still family." The message ended with static. Outside, lightning flickered on the horizon. Elias stood in the dark kitchen replaying the words over and over. Maybe that's what we need. Hope and suspicion tangled inside him like two wires sparking the same current. He reached for the framed photo of Malik and Lorraine, mother and son, smiling in the sunlight, and whispered, "You'd tell me to go, wouldn't you?" He poured himself a cup of black coffee that tasted like metal in memory. Somewhere deep down, a voice, old, steady, disciplined, told him this might be more than reconciliation. But another voice, softer, the one that still called itself father, wanted to believe. By midnight, he had already dug out the camping gear from the attic, the canvas tent, the old compass, the rusted lantern. The same things he used to teach Malik about surviving in the wild. How to track prints, how to start a fire, how to listen to silence. He packed each item carefully, his hands steady, but his heart uncertain. When he zipped the final bag shut, he caught his reflection in the window, gray hair, tired eyes, and a man who still believed love could mend what the world had broken. Outside, the city lights blinked like distant stars. In 2 days, he would drive north toward the mountains, toward his son, and toward a reckoning neither of them yet understood. The morning sky hung low over Atlanta, thick with humidity and the scent of oil-stained asphalt. Elias loaded his old Ford pickup with camping gear that hadn't seen daylight in years. The duffel bag creaked as he lifted it into the truck bed, its zippers still faintly smelling of pine and smoke ghosts of the last trip he'd taken with Malik and Lorraine. The drive to Malik's apartment on Auburn Avenue felt longer than it should have. The neighborhood was one of those places that looked up and coming on real estate flyers, but still carried the pulse of struggle underneath. Murals of civil rights heroes painted across brick walls. Dr. King, John Lewis, Ella Baker, their faces watching over cracked sidewalks and corner stores that never seemed to close. Malik was already outside, hoodie pulled tight despite the warmth tapping his phone. He looked thinner than Elias remembered, his beard trimmed into a sharp line. When he saw the truck, he smiled a flash of charm that used to melt teachers and neighbors alike. "Hey, old man," he called, walking up with a swagger that didn't match his eyes. "Didn't think you'd actually come." Elias forced a small grin. "You invited me. I figured that meant you wanted me there." "Yeah, well..." Malik glanced away. "Maybe I did." They drove north with the radio off, the only sound the hum of tires and the faint rattle of gear in the back. Miles of pine forest rolled past as the city dissolved into farmland and forgotten gas stations. Malik leaned his head against the window, scrolling through his phone. "You still work in that shop?" he asked finally. "Every day. Should have sold it years ago. Let white folks pay you for once." Elias didn't answer. He'd built that shop from nothing, piece by piece, after the Army, back when banks wouldn't lend to black mechanics. He remembered the first customer who'd refused to let him touch her car. Didn't know colored folks did transmissions, she'd said. He fixed that car anyway. Half price. Out of pride, not pity. "You know," Malik continued, his tone turning defensive, "I just want something different. I don't want to beg for respect like you did." Elias gripped the steering wheel tighter. "Respect ain't something you beg for, son. It's something you earn by showing up even when the world hopes you don't." "Yeah. And what did that get you?" "A busted back and a flag. No one salutes." Elias exhaled slowly, counting his breath the way he used to before gunfire. The road ahead narrowed between hills dusted with early spring fog. "You think anger's gonna make them see you? It won't. It'll just burn you up from the inside." Malik turned to him, voice rising. "At least I'd rather burn than bow." The words hit harder than they should have. Elias didn't respond. Outside, the landscape darkened as clouds rolled over the ridges. Rain began to fall soft at first, then heavier, streaking across the windshield like veins of silver. By the time they reached the Tennessee border, Malik's mood had shifted. He cracked open a window, letting in cold air that smelled of wet soil and pine. "You still remember how to start a fire?" he asked, half joking. Elias chuckled under his breath. "That's something you don't forget." "Good," Malik said. "You'll need to show me again. It's been a while." The old road wound upward into the mountains. A wooden sign read, "Cherokee Ridge, National Forest." The letters were faded, the kind of place locals forgot, but mapmakers never did. They pulled into a gravel lot near a trailhead marked Blue Creek Trail, 12 miles. "This it?" Elias asked. Malik nodded, pulling his backpack over one shoulder. "Yeah." "Peaceful. Right, no noise, no cops, no city." Elias stepped out, stretching his back. The air here felt different, clean, but heavy with the kind of silence that reminded you how small you were. He looked around, scanning the forest instinctively, the way the wind shifted through branches, the faint movement of deer in the brush. Old habits. Malik smirked. "Still got that soldier thing, huh?" "Old instincts keep a man alive," Elias said quietly. They hiked the first few miles without much talk. Malik moved fast, too fast, his new boots crunching over fallen leaves. Elias followed slower, methodical marking landmarks as he went, a crooked pine, a bent signpost, a stream running north. The forest whispered not with menace, but with memory. After an hour, they stopped to rest by the riverbank. Malik pulled out a flask, offered it. "Whiskey. Helps with the cold." Elias shook his head. "I'm fine." Malik took a swig, then studied his father. "You know what's crazy? I used to tell people my dad was a hero. The soldier who came home, started his own business, made it out the hood." He laughed bitterly. "Then I realized you were just another man playing by their rules." Elias looked out across the water. "Their rules kept me alive. You think freedom means breaking everything. Sometimes it means knowing what not to destroy." Malik stared at him for a long moment, something unreadable behind his eyes. Then he shrugged and stood. "We should set up camp before dark." As they moved deeper into the forest, Elias felt a strange unease. Malik checked his phone constantly, even though there was no signal. Once he saw his son glance back at him with a look that wasn't anger, it was calculation. By sunset, the sky turned the color of bruised steel. They pitched their tents beneath an old oak. The first drops of rain started to fall again, soft, deliberate, like the forest was warning them. Elias lit a lantern, the glow reflecting in Malik's eyes. For a fleeting moment, it looked like the boy he used to know, curious, restless, alive. But when Malik smiled, Elias noticed something new behind it. A plan. By morning, the rain had washed the forest clean. Mist coiled between the trees like breath, and the air smelled of damp pine and cold earth. Elias emerged from his tent first, the stiffness in his knees reminding him that age never forgot. He brewed coffee over a small burner, the hiss of boiling water blending with birdsong. Malik appeared a few minutes later, stretching, yawning too loudly. "You always up before dawn, old habits," Elias said, handing him a tin cup. "Army taught me the world moves early. You miss the morning, you miss half your chances." Malik blew on the coffee and stared into the trees. "The Army taught you to obey," he muttered. "That's what they wanted from black men back then, obedience." Elias didn't look up. "It taught me how to come home alive." They broke camp following the narrow dirt road that wound through the foothills. The truck bumped over potholes, splashing through puddles that caught the reflection of gray clouds. Hand-painted signs warned about private property dogs and trespassers, the kind of warnings that always seemed louder in the South. Malik fiddled with the radio dial, landing on an old gospel station. The singer's voice trembled through static. "Lord, I've been down so long." He turned it off quickly. "You ever think about going back north?" Malik asked. Elias grunted. "Left this land once. Thought freedom meant distance. Turns out it's just another kind of boundary. You talk like a preacher sometimes." "Just a mechanic who's seen too much," Elias said. The road curved sharply, opening to a view that made both men pause, endless forest rolling toward the horizon, and beyond that faint mountains tracing the Tennessee line. Elias pulled over. "You see that ridge?" he said, pointing. "That's where the border runs. Used to be patrol stations up there." "During the old days." "Patrol?" Malik asked. "Slave catchers," Elias said simply. "Before the war, they'd stand right there with rifles waiting for anyone dark who crossed the line." Malik frowned. "You really had to bring that up." "It's part of where we are," Elias said. "Every road in this country's built on somebody's back." Malik shifted uncomfortably. "Yeah, but I'm tired of living like we still owe somebody for it. You worked yourself to death proving them wrong, and look where it got us." Elias started the engine again. "I didn't work to prove them wrong. I worked so you'd have the freedom to argue with me." Malik fell silent. The truck rumbled forward, the conversation hanging in the air like humidity that refused to break. They stopped for gas at a rundown station miles from anywhere. The clerk, a heavy-set white man with a Confederate flag patch on his cap, glanced at them but said nothing. Malik stiffened. Elias handed over a 20 without comment, eyes, steady tone, polite. As they pulled away, Malik slammed his fist against the door. "You just gonna let that slide? What good would it do not to?" "It's about pride, Dad. It's about survival," Elias said quietly. "I learned a long time ago not every battle's worth bleeding for." Malik turned toward the window, muttering under his breath. "That's your problem. You still think surviving means winning." The forest grew thicker as they approached the ridge shadows gathering beneath the trees, even though it was barely noon. Elias noticed how Malik kept checking the trail map, his eyes darting toward his phone whenever he thought his father wasn't watching. "You sure you know where we're going?" Elias asked. "Yeah," Malik said. "You scared we'll get lost?" "I'm not scared," Elias replied. "I just don't like walking blind." They parked at the end of the gravel road where the trail disappeared into the woods. Malik shouldered his pack tighter than necessary, like he wanted to prove something. Elias adjusted his own gear with practiced precision. They began to hike. The path climbed steadily, lined with birch trees and fallen leaves that whispered underfoot. Somewhere in the distance, a hawk called out a single lonely sound echoing off the ridges. The air grew thinner. Every breath tasted like rain and old iron. After an hour, Malik stopped. "You ever wonder what Mom saw in you?" Elias blinked. "What kind of question is that?" "She was fireman. She talked about marching, organizing, building something bigger. And you fixed cars and saluted flags." Elias looked at him carefully. "She believed in building, too, just not in burning everything down to prove a point." Malik smirked. "Maybe she got tired of waiting for you to fight." The words hit like a slap, and for a moment, Elias saw not his son, but every young man who'd ever mistaken rage for strength. He wanted to yell to remind Malik of every night he'd spent working double shifts, of every time he'd swallowed pride to keep food on the table. But he didn't. He just said, "She died believing we could be better. Don't throw that away." Malik didn't answer. He started walking again, faster this time, the trail narrowing behind him like a closing fist. By the time they reached the ridge, clouds had swallowed the sky. A light drizzle fell cold enough to sting. Elias could see his breath now, thin wisps in the air. Malik stood at the edge, staring down into the valley below, endless forest stretching toward nothing. "Beautiful, ain't it?" Elias said. "Depends on what you see," Malik replied. "You see beauty. I see a place built on bones." Elias studied him, realizing with a sudden quiet dread that this trip wasn't just about reconciliation. There was something else behind Malik's eyes, something waiting. He glanced at the horizon, where the border faded into mist. 2 men, 2 Americas, and 1 road that could no longer hold them both. Night fell hard in the mountains. The air turned thin and cold, the kind that seeped through canvas and bone alike. Elias coaxed a flame from damp wood until it finally caught orange light flickering across the small clearing. Sparks spiraled upward into a ceiling of mist. Somewhere deeper in the forest, a lone owl cried one note that felt older than language. Malik sat across the fire hood, pulled up his face, a mix of glow and shadow. He scrolled through his phone again, even though there was no signal. The glow lit his features in cold blue. "You sure this thing's gonna last all night?" he asked. "It will if you feed it," Elias said. "Like anything worth keeping." Malik gave a humorless laugh. "You always got a sermon ready." Elias poked at the fire, watching sparks leap. Not a sermon, just memory. For a while they listened to the forest breathe wind in the branches, the soft crack of pine pitch. The silence between them felt heavier than any noise. "Mom loved nights like this," Malik said suddenly. "Remember when she tried to cook chili out here and burned the pot?" Elias smiled despite himself, could still smell it a week later. She said the woods made her feel free. Malik's eyes met his. "Free from everything rent rules, white folks staring. Guess she didn't pass that part on to you." Elias sighed. "Freedom's a strange thing, son. It's not always about running. Sometimes it's about standing your ground." Malik threw another stick into the flames. "Easy for you to say. You had something to stand on. Me, I got cops, landlords, and job apps that ghost me the second they see my name." "You think I didn't?" Elias's voice hardened. "When I joined the service, half my squad called me boy. I learned to outwork every one of them just to breathe the same air." "Yeah," Malik said quietly. "And what did that prove? That you could play their game better. That's not freedom, Dad. That's survival, dressed up nice." Elias stared into the fire. The wood hissed, collapsing inward. "Your mother used to say the same thing, that I mistook endurance for progress. But endurance built this life. The shop. The roof over our heads. She died waiting in a hospital that turned her away." Malik snapped. "Because you didn't have the right insurance. All that endurance didn't save her." The words landed like stones. Elias looked down at his hands, remembering the night he'd begged the nurse, the sterile smell, the cold hallway where the world had gone silent. "I know," he said finally. "I've lived with that every day." Malik's tone softened, but only slightly. "You could have sued them." "I tried. They buried it in paperwork. Same system you think I bowed to." Malik took a slow breath. "Then why keep believing in it?" "Because if I stop," Elias said, voice rough, "then everything she hoped for dies twice." The fire crackled between them, painting their faces in opposite shades. Father in amber, calm, son in restless blue. Wind tugged at the tents behind them. Malik leaned forward. "You ever wonder if maybe I'm right? That the only way we matter is by breaking what breaks us first?" Elias met his gaze. "You break enough, all that's left is pieces, and nobody cares who they belong to." For a long time, neither spoke. The forest held its breath. Then Malik smiled, small, unreadable. "You know you should write a book, The Philosophy of Obedience. Probably sell well to white folks." Elias's jaw tightened. "You done?" Malik stood, brushing ash from his jeans. "Yeah, gonna walk a bit. Need to clear my head." "Stay close to the fire," Elias said. "Bears roam this time of year." Malik's grin flashed in the darkness. "Don't worry, Dad. I know how to handle predators." He disappeared into the trees, the beam of his flashlight bobbing once, twice, then gone. The forest swallowed the sound of his steps. Elias sat alone, listening to the wind slide through the branches. He thought about Lorraine's laughter, about the promise he'd made over her hospital bed. Take care of him. Keep him safe. He wondered when protection had turned into distance, when love had hardened into discipline. Hours passed. The fire sank to embers. Malik hadn't come back. Elias added another log, staring into the dark, where his son had vanished. For the first time, the woods felt wrong, too. Still, too quiet, as if waiting for something to end. He whispered into the night, "Come back, son." The wind carried the words away, leaving only the hiss of burning wood and the faint echo of footsteps that might have been real or memory. The forest woke before the sun. First came the wind, soft as a whisper through pine needles, then the crows calling from somewhere above the mist. Elias opened his eyes to the faint chill crawling across his skin. The fire had burned to ash. The air smelled of rain and cold earth. He sat up slowly, joints cracking, eyes adjusting to the gray dawn. Malik's tent was gone. At first he thought his son had packed early, maybe fetching water from the stream. But the second tent stake still in the ground, the flattened patch of grass, the missing duffel, the silence, all of it sank in like a stone. "Malik," he called out. Only the forest answered. He walked to where the truck had been parked. Nothing. No tire tracks, no sound of an engine, just the imprint of footprints fading into mud. His throat tightened. The cooler the food packs, even the GPS gone. The world suddenly felt larger, emptier. Something white caught his eye, a folded note wedged under a rock beside the fire pit. He bent down, unfolded it with shaking hands. The handwriting was Malik's, slanted, deliberate. "Now you'll learn what freedom costs." The paper trembled between his fingers. The words looked small, almost innocent, but they cut deeper than any knife. For a long moment, Elias couldn't move. The wind pressed against his back, cold and relentless. His own son, the boy he'd carried on his shoulders through thunderstorms and ball games, had left him here, alone. His heart wanted to break, but the soldier in him refused. He folded the note, slid it into his pocket, and took inventory: a pocket knife, a lighter, half a thermos of coffee, and the clothes on his back. No food, no phone, no truck. A wilderness stretching 30 miles in every direction. He muttered under his breath the words steady like a prayer. Shelter, water, fire, direction. The survival mantra from basic training. He hadn't said it in decades. The trees loomed tall and indifferent. Somewhere far off, a woodpecker hammered at bark, the rhythm of persistence. Elias picked a direction, following the stream downhill. Water always led to people, or at least to something alive. He walked for hours, the forest swallowing sound. His boots, city soft from years in the shop, weren't made for this terrain. Mud sucked at his soles. Branches scraped his arms. The cold bit deeper with every mile. At a clearing, he stopped to rest. The sky had turned pale silver, a thin sun fighting through clouds. He looked around: animal tracks, broken twigs, the faint musk of a bear. His pulse quickened. He'd read enough survival guides to know black bears don't warn twice. He gathered dead branches and lit a small fire, crouching low to hide the smoke. Heat licked his face, and for the first time since morning, he let himself breathe. He thought of Malik, his voice, his anger. You think surviving means winning. Maybe his son had wanted to prove that point, to show that the old man's rules meant nothing in a world built to crush him. Maybe this was a lesson twisted into punishment. Freedom costs, Elias whispered. You don't even know the price. He remembered another dawn years ago when Lorraine had taken Malik to his first protest. The boy had been 13, too young to understand the chants, but old enough to feel their weight. No justice, no peace. Elias had waited in the truck, watching from a distance, too afraid of losing his job if he was seen marching. When they came home, Malik's eyes had burned with pride, and Elias had seen something then, the spark of defiance that could save him or destroy him. Now that spark had left him stranded. He stamped out the fire and started moving again. The river curved west, cutting through a ravine slick with moss. He used a fallen branch as a walking stick, tracing the flow until he found a narrow crossing of stones. His breath came in short bursts, clouding in the air. Midway across, he slipped. His knee slammed against a rock, pain flashing white. He cursed softly, but kept going one step at a time. The current roared louder as if laughing at him. He reached the opposite bank, drenched and shaking, the cold biting straight into bone. He climbed onto higher ground and looked back at the valley. Mist rolled over the trees, erasing his tracks. No one would find him here unless he found them first. Elias squinted at the horizon. The sun was rising behind gray clouds, and for a moment its light touched the trees with gold. It looked almost holy. He straightened his spine. All right, he said to no one. You want to teach me freedom, son. Let's see who learns faster. He tore a strip from his sleeve and tied it to a branch, the first marker in a trail he swore he would finish. Each knot meant survival. Each step meant defiance. And somewhere miles ahead, a son was driving south, believing his father would die alone. He was wrong. Elias Carter wasn't done yet. The cold woke Elias before the sun. His clothes were stiff with dew, his fingers numb. Every muscle ached from the night on hard ground. But he was alive, and that had to count for something. He crouched beside a patch of moss and ran his hand across the soil. It was damp rich and cold good for tracking. He found faint boot prints in the mud small enough to be Malik's. They headed north toward the deeper woods. For a second, instinct pulled him to follow. Then discipline stopped him. Never chase what's running away, his drill sergeant had said once. Survive first, fight later. He stood breathing slow through the chill air and started talking to himself the way soldiers did when silence got too heavy. Rule 1, he murmured. Find water. The stream gurgled somewhere to his left. He followed it downhill, scooping water into his palms, filtering it through a cloth torn from his shirt. The taste was metallic, but clean enough. Rule 2, shelter. He scanned the trees. A rock ledge jutted from a slope nearby, its overhang wide enough to shield him from rain. Beneath it, the ground was dry. He gathered pine branches, weaving them into a crude wall, then lined the floor with leaves. His hands moved with muscle memory, the same motions that once built foxholes in foreign deserts. Rule 3, fire, flint against steel, sparks into tinder, smoke curling upward until flame took hold. He warmed his hands, listening to the forest breathe. Every sound mattered now, the crack of twigs, the flutter of wings, the groan of trees bending under wind. Civilization was gone. What remained was instinct. And instinct, Elias thought grimly, didn't care about race or politics or forgiveness. It only cared about who kept breathing. By midday he was moving again, the forest thickened branches clawing at his jacket. Sunlight pierced through the canopy in sharp beams, turning the mist into gold dust. He counted his steps, measured direction by the sun's arc. West meant roads. Roads meant people. People meant safety or danger. At a clearing he stopped. The silence was too perfect. No birds, no rustling. He turned slowly, scanning the trees. Then he saw it deep claw marks, gouged into a trunk, high enough to belong to something big. Bear sign. Fresh. His pulse quickened. "Easy, Eli," he whispered. "Don't run. Never run." He reached for a thick branch, holding it like a rifle heart pounding in his ears. The forest seemed to hold its breath with him. Minutes crawled, then nothing. The wind moved again, and he exhaled. The bear had passed. Still, he didn't linger. He pushed onward until the terrain began to slope down. Through the trees he caught sight of a half-collapsed cabin, its roof sagging, its windows shattered. Maybe once it belonged to loggers or hunters. Now it was another ruin swallowed by wilderness. Inside, dust and rot. A rusted pot, a broken cot, a few animal bones near the corner. Elias checked every wall, every creak, then sat against the cold stone hearth. He pulled out the note Malik had left and read it again. "Now you'll learn what freedom costs," he whispered. "Freedom, huh? You left a man who built your freedom out of his own blood." He folded the note carefully, tucked it back into his pocket. Then he pulled a piece of charcoal from the hearth and began scribbling on the wall. Words, coordinates, memories, anything to keep his mind tethered. He wrote, "If found, name is Elias Carter. I served my country. I have a son, Malik. He forgot who he is. Tell him his father still remembers." When the charcoal snapped, he sat in the silence. A memory drifted in his first day of basic training. The sergeant barking orders, the white recruits whispering slurs, the heat, the humiliation. How he'd promised himself he'd never break. You don't give them that satisfaction, he'd told himself then. You stand tall, always. He stood now taller than the ache in his bones. "Rule 4, he muttered. "Never stop moving." He left the cabin and climbed toward higher ground. Each step burned. His breath came short white clouds in the cold air. But there, through a gap in the trees, he saw smoke. Not wild smoke, controlled, thin and straight. Human. Hope flared sharp and dangerous. He followed it careful, steady. His boots slipped in the mud. Branches tore his sleeves. When he broke through the tree line, he froze. Below, in a shallow valley, stood a cluster of cabins. Not park rangers, old homes, maybe a hidden settlement. He could make out laundry lines, a faint guitar riff echoing across the wind. Voices. Black voices. He blinked, disbelief washing over him. People still living out here, free and unseen? His chest tightened with something that wasn't quite relief. History, he thought. I've walked straight into it. He took a cautious step forward, raising his hand in greeting. "Hey," he called, voice hoarse. "Name's Elias Carter. I'm—" The sound of footsteps cut him off. A figure emerged from behind a cabin, a woman with silver braids and a rifle resting against her shoulder. Her gaze was calm, but wary. "Don't move," she said. "You lost soldier?" Elias lowered his hands slowly, exhaustion mixing with gratitude. "Ma'am," he said, "I've been lost for a long time." The woman with silver braids studied him from across the clearing, her rifle steady but not raised. Behind her, smoke drifted from a chimney and mingled with the scent of cedar and cornmeal. Two other figures appeared, a tall man with a gray beard and a teenage girl holding a lantern. Their expressions weren't fearful, just cautious, the way people get when the world has taught them to measure every stranger. "I'm not here to cause trouble," Elias said, keeping his hands visible. "Name's Elias Carter. Got lost up near Cherokee Ridge. My son drove off, left me stranded." The older man stepped forward, voice rough as gravel. "That's a mighty cruel way for kin to treat you." Elias gave a tired laugh. "Yeah, seems the world's still teaching lessons the hard way." The woman lowered the rifle eyes, narrowing with recognition. "Carter, you from down Atlanta way?" "Yes, ma'am." She nodded. "Then you're walking on old ground. Our people called this place Hidden Valley. Used to be a stop on the Underground Railroad." Elias blinked. "You mean Freedmen's Town?" the bearded man interrupted. "Built by the ones who escaped and stayed gone. We just never left." For the first time since the betrayal, Elias felt something stir inside him that wasn't anger or pain. It was awe. These people had lived quietly in the folds of the forest, carrying the history others tried to bury. They led him toward one of the cabins where a fire crackled in a stone hearth. The teenage girl handed him a tin bowl filled with stew. He hadn't realized how hungry he was until the first spoonful. The heat brought life back into his hands. "I'm Ruth," the woman said. "That's Jonah and the young one's Naya. You're safe here for the night." "Safe," Elias repeated softly, as if testing the word. "It's been a long time since I felt that." Ruth poured him water. "You said your boy left you." "Why?" Elias stared into the flames. "He wanted to teach me something. Said I'd forgotten what freedom costs." Jonah shook his head. "Sounds like a boy raised by a country that still don't know what freedom means." Elias met his gaze. He grew up angry. Can't blame him. The world told him every day he didn't belong. "Anger's earned," Ruth said. "But it's a heavy thing to carry. Breaks your back before it breaks your chains." They fell quiet. Outside, wind brushed against the shutters like restless hands. The smell of wood smoke filled the room. Nia sat near the doorway studying Elias with curiosity. "You were a soldier?" she asked. "Yeah," he said. "Long time ago." "My granddaddy fought too," she said proudly. "Said he joined so nobody could ever own him again." Elias smiled. "Then your granddaddy and I fought for the same reason." Later, Ruth showed him to a spare cot in the corner. "Rest. You'll need strength if you plan to make it out of these woods." "Thank you," he said. "I didn't think kindness still lived in places like this." She gave a small smile. "Kindness don't survive in cities. It survives where folks still remember what it cost." That night, Elias couldn't sleep. The forest hummed outside the same low music his ancestors might have heard when they followed the North Star. He thought of Malik, the fury in his eyes, the note the words about freedom. Maybe the boy wasn't just cruel. Maybe he was lost in the same wilderness Elias had been fighting his whole life. He rose quietly and stepped outside. The valley stretched before him, moonlight silvering the rooftops. Smoke curled upward from chimneys tracing invisible lines into the stars. For a moment, he imagined the footsteps of the people who had walked this ground before, bare feet pressed into mud breath held, as dogs barked in the distance, hope carried in whispers. Freedom had always been a direction, not a destination. Jonah appeared beside him, silent as a shadow. "Couldn't sleep." Elias shook his head. "You ever think we're still walking the same road? Just don't see the chains anymore." Jonah chuckled softly. "Chains don't disappear, brother. They just get quieter." They stood there for a long while, two old men looking out over land soaked with memory. Elias felt the weight of every generation pressing behind him, men and women who refused to die even when history told them to vanish. When he finally lay down again, he whispered a promise to the dark, "I won't die out here, not where they survived." Morning came with bird song and thin light. Ruth handed him a small bundle, jerky water, a map drawn in pencil. "Follow the trail west. It'll take you toward the highway." Elias hesitated. "I owe you more than thanks." "You owe us survival," Ruth said simply. "That's payment enough." As he stepped into the forest again, the ground felt different beneath his boots, steady or sacred. The tracks of those who came before were invisible but unmistakable, running right beside his own. He followed them. The morning air was sharp, carrying the clean scent of pine and wood smoke. Elias moved carefully along the dirt trail Ruth had mapped for him, the folded paper warm from his pocket. The path wove through ridges veined with roots down toward the western valley, where the trees grew younger and the light easier to trust. Each step felt less like escape and more like pilgrimage. He thought about what Ruth had said before dawn, "You owe us survival." The words clung to him like armor. By noon, he reached a fork in the trail where 3 wooden markers stood, each carved with symbols, instead of words, triangles, circles, arrows. He recognized them from military briefings decades ago, old navigation codes used by freedom seekers and later by black soldiers in foreign lands. The thought hit him with quiet awe. Generations had walked these woods, leaving signs for one another. Maybe Malik had never known that kind of inheritance existed. He stopped at a creek to refill his bottle. The water reflected his face, lined weary, but still unbroken. In the reflection, he saw his father, too, and his grandfather. Before that, men who had carried themselves through storms the world pretended not to see. For the first time since Malik left him, Elias didn't feel like a victim. He felt like part of a line that refused to end. When he climbed the next hill, the sound of hammers and laughter reached his ears. Beyond the ridge, a cluster of houses came into view, simple wooden frames painted in bright colors. Children chased each other between laundry lines. A man with a straw hat was fixing a fence, humming a blues tune that melted into the hum of bees. The settlement was alive, hidden, and unmistakably black. Elias approached slowly, hands visible. The man looked up, eyes narrowing before softening into curiosity. "You from Ruth's place?" Elias nodded. "She said there was a road this way." "Then she sent you right," the man said. "Name's Isaiah. Welcome to Pine Hollow." Isaiah led him into the village, a place that seemed untouched by time yet full of purpose. Small gardens stretched behind every cabin. Solar panels glinted on a few roofs, and murals of ancestors covered the sides of barns. Harriet with her lantern, a Tuskegee airman, a nurse in scrubs. The people greeted Elias not with suspicion, but with recognition, as if they already knew what kind of wound had brought him here. An older woman stirring a pot over a fire asked, "You been walking long, brother?" "Long enough to remember who I am," Elias said. The woman nodded. "Then sit. You look like you need to talk." He told them pieces of it. The son who left him the betrayal, the note about freedom. The villagers listened without judgment. When he finished, Isaiah shook his head. "That boy ain't your enemy. He's what happens when the world forgets to teach grace." Elias stared into the fire. "He thinks I'm weak because I bent instead of breaking." Isaiah's smile was faint but firm. "Bending kept you alive. You can't blame a young man for not knowing the price of that." A woman named Lila handed him bread still warm from the fire. "You know, she said our people built this place so our kids would have somewhere to belong. But some of them leave anyway, chasing something louder. City lights fast talk. Freedom with no roots don't last long." Elias swallowed the bread, its warmth steadying him. "Maybe I gave my son too much of that kind of freedom, never made him earn the soil under his feet." "You still got time to show him," Lila said. "Sometimes God puts us through the woods just to remind us the road home ain't straight." Later, as the sun lowered, Isaiah showed Elias the community center. They were building logs, stacked high walls, half-finished. "This here," Isaiah said proudly, "is where we'll teach the young ones their history. Not the kind in school books, the kind that kept us breathing." Elias ran his hand over the wood grain. "You're building more than walls." "Damn right," Isaiah said. "We're building memory." "You got skill, soldier?" "You look like a man who knows his way around a wrench." Elias laughed, the sound surprising him. "Spent my life fixing engines." "Then you can fix these rafters too," Isaiah said with a grin. "Ain't no man passes through Pine Hollow without leaving something standing behind." So he stayed through evening, working beside them. Nails, beams, laughter. The rhythm of shared labor filled the valley, the same rhythm his ancestors might have known in fields, turned now into something stronger, creation instead of survival. The calluses on his palms remembered what purpose felt like. When night came, the community gathered for dinner under a string of lights. Children ran between the tables, someone played harmonica. Ruth's message replayed in his mind. "You owe us survival." He understood it now. Survival wasn't just staying alive. It was keeping the story alive, passing it forward, so no one had to start from zero again. As the stars brightened, Elias looked toward the dark line of the highway beyond the trees. Somewhere out there, Malik was living on borrowed arrogance, believing he'd killed the past. But here, surrounded by strangers who felt like family, Elias saw the truth. The past never dies. It waits patient, forgiving, for the hands that remember how to build again. Tomorrow he would head back to face his son. But tonight he let himself breathe, warmed by a fire built from 1,000 quiet revolutions. Morning broke soft and gold over Pine Hollow. Dew glittered on the grass, and the distant hum of a rooster echoed through the valley. Elias stood outside Isaiah's cabin, watching the fog peel off the trees like smoke from a slow fire. His hands still ached from yesterday's labor, but the ache felt good, honest, clean. It had been years since his body had remembered what purpose felt like. He ate breakfast with Isaiah and Lila, cornbread, fried apples, and coffee thick enough to stand a spoon in. They talked about weather work and the road ahead. But beneath every word, Elias could feel something heavier pulsing in his chest, the knowledge that peace could only last so long before duty called it away. "I'm heading out today," he said finally. "My boy thinks I'm dead. I can't let him carry that lie too long." Isaiah leaned back in his chair, eyes steady. "You sure that's all it is? Or you going back to make him pay?" Elias stared at his cup. Steam rose in lazy spirals. "Both, maybe, but not the way he expects." Lila set down her fork. "Then you'd better go with a plan, not a wound. Wounds make messy choices." Her words struck home. He nodded slowly. "I've got one." He spent the rest of the morning in Isaiah's small workshop, a shed filled with sawdust tools and the faint scent of oil. He borrowed paper and a pen and began writing lists, names, directions. He drew up legal notes, outlined the steps he would take when he got back to Atlanta. Every line of ink was a piece of armor. When Isaiah came by, Elias showed him the document. "You're serious about this foundation?" Isaiah asked. Elias nodded. "Carter Foundation for Black Youth Resilience. A scholarship, a mentorship program, maybe even apprenticeships through my shop. Every dollar I earned fixing engines, every cent Malik thought he'd inherit, it's going to the kids who need it." Isaiah smiled slowly. "You turning your pain into seed money. That's the idea." They loaded supplies into Isaiah's truck before noon. "I'll take you to the main road," Isaiah said. "From there it's an hour to the highway. You can hitch a ride into town." Elias hesitated. "You've done more for me than my own blood." Isaiah's hand found his shoulder. "Then go make that mean something. Don't let the hurt own you." The drive wound through narrow trails and abandoned farms, relics of families who'd left long ago. Elias looked out the window, watching sunlight filter through trees, each mile peeling away layers of fear. The forest no longer felt like a trap. It felt like an elder, stern patient, and quietly proud that he'd listened long enough to understand. When they reached the edge of the highway, Isaiah pulled over. "You sure you're ready?" Elias tightened the strap of his pack. "I'm more ready than I've ever been." Isaiah nodded. "Then don't look back." Elias smiled faintly. "That's the thing about the past, brother. It follows you whether you face it or not." They clasped hands, two men bound not by blood, but by understanding, and then Elias stepped out into the open road. Asphalt stretched west toward Chattanooga, and beyond that, Atlanta waited like a question that needed answering. He walked for hours, thumb out, until a pickup truck finally slowed. The driver, a middle-aged black woman with sharp eyes and gospel music playing low, leaned across the seat. "You look like you've been through something," she said. Elias smiled. "You could say that." She drove him south, and as the mountains fell away behind them, he began to see billboards again, insurance companies, politicians, slogans about unity that felt like they were written for everyone except the people who needed them most. The city shimmered ahead, full of noise, light, and contradiction. At a rest stop, he borrowed the driver's phone to call an old friend, his attorney, Mr. Jacobs. "Elias," the man said, surprised. "You're alive, long story," Elias said, "but I need your help. I'm changing my will. Everything. We'll file the papers tomorrow morning. You sure you want to do that?" Elias looked out at the sunset bleeding over the horizon. "I've never been more sure of anything." By dusk, the truck dropped him on the outskirts of Atlanta. The skyline glowed like a mirage in the humid air. He found an old motel near the interstate, paid cash, and sat at the edge of the bed with his pack beside him. The room smelled of disinfectant and rusted dreams. He unfolded Ruth's map, then the new one Isaiah had given him, both inked by hands that believed in direction. Between them, his path looked like a circle, not a line from the city that forgot him to the forest that remembered him, and now back again to the confrontation he could no longer avoid. He took out the folded note from Malik, the same one that had started it all, and placed it on the table beside his documents. The words no longer stung. They just reminded him what had to come next. Elias picked up the motel phone, dialed a number he hadn't used in years, and waited. When the line clicked, a familiar voice answered, wary but polite. "Hello, Malik," Elias said quietly. "It's me." A pause, then a sharp inhale. "Dad." "You're how we need to talk," Elias said, face to face, tomorrow morning, at the shop. Silence stretched, then Malik's voice uncertain. "Yeah, Okay, I'll be there. Elias hung up and stared at the ceiling, listening to the hum of the neon sign outside. His heartbeat was steady now, not with fear, but resolve. He whispered into the stillness, "Tomorrow, son, we see what freedom really costs." Atlanta's dawn was the color of rusted gold, humid, heavy, alive. Elias parked Isaiah's borrowed truck outside his auto shop just as the first sunlight hit the cracked pavement. Dust lay over everything, the sign that read, "Carter & Son Auto Repair." The windows smeared by weeks of neglect, the silence of a place built for motion. He unlocked the front door, and the scent of oil, metal, and memory washed over him. For a moment, he stood there and let it happen, every sound from the past echoing in his mind. The rattle of wrenches, Malik's teenage laughter, Lorraine's voice calling him to dinner. The ghosts felt close enough to touch. He flicked the lights on. A few bulbs hummed weakly to life. His old office sat in the back corner, papers still scattered across the desk, where he'd left them before the trip. On top of them lay the framed photo of Lorraine and Malik at his high school graduation. He wiped dust from the glass and whispered, "I'm home." A black sedan pulled up outside. Elias saw it through the window, sleek, tinted out of place among the rusted cars. The driver's door opened. Malik stepped out. He looked different. Sharper clothes, a gold watch that glinted in the sunlight, eyes too tired for his age. There was a confidence in his stride that didn't belong to him, the kind that comes from borrowed power. Behind him, another car idled a man in a suit sitting in the passenger seat. Elias recognized the emblem on the door, Fulton Realty Group. So it was true. Malik was selling the shop. Malik paused at the door before pushing it open. The small bell above it jingled a sound that used to mean family. "Dad," he said, forcing a smile. "You made it back." Elias wiped his hands on a rag, eyes never leaving his son's face. "Seems so," he said. Surprised, Malik exhaled sharply, half a laugh. You look good. Guess I underestimated you." "You did that your whole life," Elias said quietly. The realtor stepped forward, extending a hand. "Mr. Carter, I'm Todd Brennan with Fulton Realty. Your son said you'd agreed to sell the property. We're ready to finalize the—" Elias raised a hand. "You can leave, Mr. Brennan." The man blinked. "Excuse me. This shop isn't for sale," Elias said. "Not to you, not to anyone." Malik's voice hardened. "Dad, don't start this. You can't keep holding on to this place. It's dying just like everything you built. This is business." Elias turned toward him. "You mean it's betrayal dressed up in a suit?" Malik's jaw tightened. "You think too small. This place could be condos, restaurants, real money. You're clinging to a legacy nobody cares about anymore." Elias nodded slowly. "You're right about one thing. Nobody cared, not until I built it with my hands. Every bolt in this place paid for your schooling, your car, your life." "Yeah, and what did that buy me?" Malik snapped. "A lifetime of being told to wait my turn. I'm done waiting, Dad." Elias leaned on the workbench, studying his son the way he used to study broken engines, searching for what could still be repaired. "You left me in those woods," he said, voice even. "Left me to die." Malik flinched but didn't look away. "You're alive, aren't you? I just wanted you to see how it feels to be powerless." Powerless. Elias took a slow step forward. "You think money makes you powerful? You couldn't survive one night without someone else's map." Malik scoffed, but his voice cracked. "You don't get it. You spent your whole life begging for respect." "I'm taking mine." Elias's tone stayed calm. "By selling your father's name to a man who'd never hire you if he didn't have to." The silence that followed was sharp as metal. Even the realtor shifted uncomfortably. Elias broke it first. "Mr. Brennan," he said without turning, "leave. This is between father and son." The man hesitated, then left quickly, muttering something about unfinished paperwork. The door closed. The bell jingled again. Just the two of them now. Malik turned away, pacing. "You think this is about you? It's about me getting out. I won't die fixing cars while white boys drive Teslas past me like I'm invisible." Elias's voice softened. "You were never invisible, son. You just stopped seeing yourself." Malik froze. For a moment he looked 12 again, scared, stubborn, lost. Then the mask slid back on. "You don't understand," he said. "You never did. Elias walked to the desk, opened a drawer, and pulled out a folder. Inside were freshly signed documents, notarized, sealed official. He placed them gently on the table between them. "What's this?" Malik asked. "A change," Elias said. "My will, my business, my legacy." Malik picked up the top page, reading aloud. "Carter Foundation for Black Youth Resilience." His voice trailed off. His eyes lifted. "You're giving it away." Elias nodded. "Every cent, every tool, every dollar I made. It'll build scholarships, mentorships, training programs for kids who need a start." Malik's face darkened. "You're joking." "I'm done enabling a man who mistakes inheritance for identity," Elias said. "You wanted freedom, Malik. Now you've got it. No safety net, no excuses, just the world same as it was for me." The air between them tightened. Malik's breathing quickened. "You're punishing me." "I'm teaching you," Elias said quietly. "The same lesson I learned in those woods." For a moment neither spoke. The city noise outside hummed like static. Then Malik whispered, "You hate me." Elias shook his head. "No, I'm finally loving you right." Malik's eyes filled anger, confusion, something like grief. He slammed the folder shut, turned toward the door, then stopped. "You always said this place was home," he said. "Guess I was never part of that." Elias's reply was soft but steady. "Home's not where you're given something, son. It's where you choose to build." Malik left without another word. The doorbell jingled one last time, then silence reclaimed the shop. Elias stood there, the morning sun bleeding through the window onto the dusty floor. He walked to the workbench, touched the steel tools lined neatly in a row, and whispered a quiet prayer, not for vengeance, but for redemption. Because sometimes love doesn't save you. It just refuses to let you stay lost. The rain came back that night, thick and heavy, drumming against the tin roof of the shop like a heartbeat that refused to quit. Elias sat at his desk, the paperwork for the foundation laid out before him, still smelling of fresh ink. The fluorescent light flickered overhead. Outside Atlanta's streets hissed with water and passing cars, but in here the world was perfectly still. He knew Malik would come back. Pride always circles back when it can't stand silence. At 10 p.m., headlights swept across the windows. The bell above the door chimed once. Malik stepped inside, soaked to the bone, rain dripping from his jacket. His eyes were red, not from the storm. "Dad," he began, voice rough, "we need to talk." Elias didn't look up right away. "I figured you'd say that," he said, flipping the final page of the foundation document. "Lock the door." Malik hesitated, then did as told. He looked older than he had that morning, like something had been peeled away. "I talked to the lawyer," he said. "He confirmed everything. You really gave it all away." "I did." Why? Elias leaned back in his chair. "Because what I built was meant to lift people, not crush them. You tried to turn it into a tombstone." Malik stepped forward, fists clenched. "You think you're righteous, don't you? You think because you suffered, you get to control how everyone else uses what you built." Elias stood, meeting his son's height. "I controlled nothing, Malik. I just stopped feeding your anger. You left me in the woods to die, and I came back to make sure you never live that way again." Malik's voice broke. "You don't get it. You don't know what it's like being my age, walking into every room and watching people clutch their wallets or cross the street. You built your peace by swallowing pride. I can't live like that." "I know," Elias said, "and I don't want you to. But you can't fight the world by becoming what it made you afraid of." Malik laughed bitterly. "So what, I'm just supposed to forgive everything? Pretend the system doesn't see me as disposable?" "Forgiveness isn't pretending," Elias said softly. "It's choosing not to let their hatred live in you rent-free." Malik turned away, pacing. "You sound just like Mom, always preaching hope when the world spits in your face." Elias's throat tightened. "Your mother saw the world as it was. She just refused to stop believing it could be better. That's not weakness. That's war." Thunder rolled outside, rattling the windows. Malik stopped pacing. "You really think giving everything to strangers is going to fix this? You think that's what she'd want?" "Yes," Elias said, "because it means the next Malik out there might not grow up with a chip on his shoulder. He might grow up with a chance." Malik's eyes glistened, but he swallowed it down. "You're punishing me for being angry." "No," Elias said. "I'm holding you accountable for what you did with that anger." Malik's voice dropped to a whisper. "I didn't mean to kill you." "You didn't," Elias said. "But you tried. Maybe not with your hands, but with your heart." The words hung in the air like smoke. Malik looked away, jaw trembling. "I thought if you were gone, I'd finally be free. But the moment I drove away, I felt empty." Elias stepped closer, slow and deliberate. "Freedom without compassion is just another kind of prison." Malik's breath hitched. "I messed up." "Yes," Elias said simply. "But mistakes are only final when you stop trying to repair them." Rain beat harder outside. The lights flickered again, dimming, returning. For the first time, Malik didn't argue. He just stood there, shaking slightly. "What do I do now?" Elias reached into the drawer, pulled out a single envelope. "You start here," he said, handing it over. Malik opened it. Inside were photos, the foundation logo, sketches of the Mentorship Center, a copy of the scholarship mission statement. "You want me to work for this. I want you to help it live," Elias said. "It's in your blood to build. You just forgot how." Malik looked down at the photos, then up at his father. "And if I say no?" "Then walk away," Elias said calmly. "But you'll know you walked from something built with your name on it." Lightning flashed through the shop windows. For a moment they both stood outlined in the brief, bright silence between thunder and rain. Father and son, two silhouettes stitched together by everything the world had tried to tear apart. Malik finally nodded once. "I'll think about it." "That's all I ask," Elias said. "But if you come back, you come right." Malik swallowed hard, pocketed the envelope, and turned toward the door. Before stepping into the rain, he said quietly, "You ever think maybe God put us through this just to see if we could forgive each other?" Elias's answer came slow. "Maybe. Or maybe he just wanted to see if we'd survive long enough to try." The door closed, the bell chimed, then only rain. Elias sat back down, staring at the empty doorway. His hands trembled slightly, not from fear, but from something else. Relief, resolve, the kind of tired peace that doesn't come from winning, but from finally telling the truth. The next morning broke gray and soft over Atlanta, the kind of morning that doesn't know whether to rain or shine. Elias was already awake before the sun, sitting behind his desk at the shop. A single lamp burned on the table, its light spilling across the stack of legal documents that now defined everything he had left to give. He smoothed his hand over the top page, the official charter of the Carter Foundation for Black Youth Resilience, and whispered, "You're real now." At 8 o'clock sharp, a knock echoed at the glass door. His attorney, Mr. Jacobs, stepped in, shaking the drizzle from his umbrella. "You weren't kidding about early," he said, smiling faintly. "You look like a man ready to rewrite history." Elias chuckled. "Just trying to finish what I started." Jacobs placed a folder on the desk. "Everything's been filed. The foundation is recognized as a legal entity as of this morning. Your business, your savings, even the land all transferred." Elias nodded slowly. "Then it's done." Jacobs hesitated. "You sure you don't want to leave anything for your son? It's not too late." Elias's gaze moved to the window, where the city blinked awake beyond the fog. "I'm leaving him the truth. That's worth more than money." They signed the final pages in silence, the pen scratching softly across paper. When it was done, Jacobs gathered the documents and shook Elias's hand. "For what it's worth," he said, "you're building something that'll outlive both of you." "Let's hope so," Elias replied. When Jacobs left, the shop felt even quieter than before. The rain had stopped, but the air still carried that damp smell of renewal. Elias cleaned the workbench, lined up the wrenches, the screwdrivers, the oil rags, everything in perfect order. It was ritual more than labor, a soldier's way of saying goodbye without ceremony. He was halfway through stacking old invoices when he heard footsteps behind him. He didn't have to turn. "Didn't expect you this early," he said. Malik's voice came from the doorway, low, cautious. "You said if I came back, I should come right." Elias faced him. Malik's clothes were wrinkled, his eyes ringed with sleeplessness, but something had shifted. The arrogance was gone. What stood in its place looked like humility trying to breathe again. I read the packet you gave me, Malik said. The foundation, the apprenticeships. You're trying to do what the system never did for you. Elias leaned against the counter. Not for me. For the next kid who thinks anger is the only language left. Malik stepped closer. You want me to work for it? No, Elias said. I want you to serve it. There's a difference. Malik studied him. You think people will forgive me? After what I did? Elias shook his head. You're not asking for forgiveness from them. You're asking it from yourself. Silence fell heavy, but not hostile. Malik walked slowly around the shop, touching the walls, the tools, the old photos of him as a child, grease on his cheeks, a grin full of missing teeth. Mom used to say you could fix anything, he murmured. I didn't believe her. She wasn't wrong, Elias said, but fixing doesn't always mean saving. Malik turned back. Then maybe it's time I learn the difference. Elias's throat tightened. He motioned to a drawer behind the desk. Open it. Malik did. Inside lay a single envelope marked Board Appointment. His name was typed neatly across the front. What is this? Your first job, Elias said. You'll sit on the Foundation's board under supervision. You'll help design mentorship programs for the kids who remind you of yourself. Malik's voice cracked. You trust me with that. I trust you to try, Elias said softly. That's more than I expected a week ago. Malik swallowed hard, staring down at the envelope like it might burn his hands. You really believe people can change, don't you? Elias smiled faintly. I have to. Otherwise, none of this means a damn thing. They stood there for a long moment, the hum of the city bleeding faintly through the walls. It wasn't forgiveness yet, not entirely, but it was the beginning of something that could grow into it. Finally, Malik said, What happens now? Elias gestured toward the open shop bay. Outside, the clouds had started to break sunlight glinting off wet pavement. Now, he said, we get back to work. Malik nodded once. Then I guess I'll start by fixing what I broke. He picked up a wrench from the workbench and twirled it nervously in his hand, the way he used to as a kid, pretending to help. Elias said nothing, just watched silently, grateful that the tool didn't slip this time. The light through the window grew warmer, spilling over them both. It caught on the signed documents on the desk paper shields against a lifetime of regret, fragile but powerful. Outside, a new day waited. Inside, for the first time in years, the sound of work began again. 2 weeks later, the letter from the Fulton County District Attorney's Office arrived. It was printed on crisp paper, the kind that always smells faintly of cold justice. Elias read it twice before setting it down beside his coffee. We are reopening an investigation into the alleged abandonment and attempted homicide of Mr. Elias Carter. A warrant for Malik Carter's cooperation has been issued. He sat still for a long moment, listening to the steady hum of the shop outside, the rhythm of drills, air compressors, the chatter of the young men and women he'd hired from Pine Hollow to help rebuild the business under the Foundation's name. The noise of life returned, and yet the letter sat there like a ghost that refused to leave. Malik walked in from the garage, wiping grease from his hands. You got mail? Elias folded the letter before Malik could see it. Official business, he said. Malik frowned. From who county office? Silence stretched between them, uncomfortable, familiar. Malik finally asked, They coming after me? Elias sighed. They want to talk. That's all. He slid the paper across the table. Malik's eyes skimmed the words, his face tightening as he read. I figured this might happen, Malik said softly. You didn't press charges, but someone must have reported it. I did? Elias said, back when I thought anger was all that was left. Malik nodded slowly, his voice low. Guess that's fair. He didn't yell, didn't argue, just looked down at the floor, his shoulders sagging. It was the posture of a man carrying a weight he finally recognized as his own. You can fight it, Elias offered. Self-report. Tell the truth, make it right. Malik gave a bitter laugh. You think the system's going to believe a black man who left his father in the woods? I'll be lucky if they let me tell my side at all. Elias leaned forward. Then tell it anyway. You face what you did, Malik. You don't hide behind guilt or fear or history. You show up. Malik looked up at him. Like you did, exactly like I did. Outside rain started again, a thin drizzle tapping the shop windows. Malik folded the letter carefully, as if afraid of tearing it. "You'd still stand with me?" he asked quietly. Elias hesitated. "I'll stand beside you in truth, not in excuses." Malik nodded, eyes glistening. "Then that's enough." Later that afternoon, Elias drove him downtown. They didn't speak much on the way. The city blurred past murals, bus stops, billboards for lawyers promising freedom starts here. The irony stung. At the courthouse, Malik took a deep breath. "You don't have to come in," he said. "I know," Elias replied, "but I want to see you walk through that door on your own." Malik straightened his shoulders and entered the building. Elias stayed outside, standing beneath the awning as rain fell harder. He watched through the glass as Malik spoke with an officer, then was led to a waiting room. There was no handcuff, no anger, just the quiet dignity of consequence. When Malik reemerged an hour later, his face looked pale but lighter. "They're offering community service instead of prison," he said. 200 hours with nonprofit youth programs. They said it's because of your foundation." Elias blinked. "My foundation?" Malik smiled faintly. "Guess your paper shield turned out to be more than paper." They walked back to the truck together. The rain had stopped and the streets glistened beneath a break in the clouds. Elias glanced sideways at his son. "You scared a little." "Good," Elias said. "Means you care about what comes next." As they reached the shop, Malik paused at the door. "You ever think maybe everything was supposed to happen?" Elias tilted his head. "What do you mean? Like maybe God needed to burn it all down before we could build something real?" Elias smiled sadly. "Maybe so. Or maybe he just gave us a second chance to prove we're worth the miracle." Inside the shop buzzed with work again, young apprentices' music low on the radio, the smell of oil and sawdust filling the air. Malik rolled up his sleeves and joined them, nodding toward his father, before taking a wrench from the bench. Elias watched him for a long moment, the steady rhythm of his hands, the quiet focus, the humility where arrogance used to live. The law hadn't saved them. But maybe it had reminded them both what redemption actually looked like, not a clean slate, but a shared effort to write the next line together. Elias turned the lights up, smiled faintly and said, "Back to work, son." For the first time, Malik didn't flinch at the word son. He just nodded. "Yes, sir." The summer heat came early that year. Atlanta shimmered under its haze rising off asphalt air thick with humidity and honeysuckle. Inside the shop, the hum of fans and the clatter of tools filled the space where silence used to live. Elias stood at the garage door, arms folded, watching Malik guide a group of teenagers through an engine demo. Their voices bounced off the metal walls, laughter questions, the kind of noise that sounded like healing. One of the boys dropped a wrench. Malik crouched beside him, showing how to angle his grip. "Don't fight the bolt," he said. "Feel it. It'll tell you which way it wants to turn." Elias smiled faintly. It was something he used to say. At the back of the room, a banner hung above the workbench, Carter Foundation, Building Futures, Not Excuses. When the session ended, Malik handed out water bottles, laughing when one of the girls called him Mr. C. The nickname made Elias laugh out loud. "Didn't think I'd ever see the day," he said as Malik walked over. Malik grinned, wiping sweat from his forehead. "Guess I'm growing into the name." "You're doing good work," Elias said. "The kids look up to you." Malik's smile softened. "They remind me of me back when I still thought the world was all locked doors." Elias nodded slowly. "Sometimes it takes breaking one to learn how to build another." They sat outside the shop on the old bench, the same one where Elias had once eaten lunch alone, while Malik stormed off in anger. The air buzzed with cicadas. Across the street, a mural of Lorraine watched over the neighborhood, her face painted from an old photo haloed by gears and stars. Malik stared at it for a long time. "I forgot how much she smiled," he said quietly. Elias followed his gaze. She believed joy was resistance. The world tried to take that from her, but she kept giving it away anyway. Malik's voice trembled. "I hated her for dying, and I hated you for surviving." Elias said nothing. He let the confession hang there as heavy and sacred as prayer. After a moment, Malik whispered, "I'm sorry, Dad." Elias turned, meeting his son's eyes, eyes that finally looked like his own. "You already started making it right," he said. "That's all any man can do." They sat in silence, the kind that didn't sting anymore. A car horn sounded down the street. A delivery truck pulled up boxes marked with the Foundation's logo stacked high in the back. New tools, uniforms, hope made tangible. Malik jumped up to help unload them. The volunteers waved as they passed older women from the neighborhood high schoolers, even a few of the Pine Hollow crew who'd driven down to help open a new community garage. It wasn't charity anymore. It was collaboration. The invisible wall between generations had cracked open, letting light through. Elias carried a box inside, set it on the counter, and caught his reflection in the shop mirror. The years had carved deep lines into his face, but the eyes staring back didn't look tired, they looked ready. Ruth's voice from the woods echoed in his memory. "You owe us survival." He smiled. "I paid my debt, sister," he murmured, "and then some." That night, the Foundation hosted its first community dinner. The shop was cleared out tables lined with barbecue cornbread and sweet tea. Music filled the air, blues soul laughter. Malik took the small stage near the tool racks and tapped the mic. "I never thought I'd be standing here," he began, his voice steady. "A year ago, I was lost in anger. Thought the only way to win was to destroy what came before me. My father taught me otherwise." All eyes turned to Elias, who looked down humbled. Malik continued. "He showed me that freedom ain't about taking what's yours. It's about building something that outlasts your mistakes." Applause filled the room. Elias felt tears burn behind his eyes, but he didn't hide them. He let them fall for Lorraine, for Malik, for every boy who'd ever been told he'd never be enough. When the music started again, Malik joined him at the table, raising a glass. "To second chances," he said. Elias clinked his glass against his son's, and to the hands that lift, he replied. They drank. Outside, the night hummed with crickets and passing cars, the city alive and listening. Somewhere far off, thunder rolled again, but this time it didn't sound like a warning. It sounded like applause. Dawn spilled through the shop windows, soft and gold. The floor gleamed faintly from last night's cleanup, and the smell of barbecue and oil still lingered in the air. Elias sat alone at his desk, sipping coffee gone lukewarm, watching the light crawl across the banner that hung above the garage bay. Carter Foundation. Rebuild. Restore. Rise. He traced the edge of an old photo lying beside the mug Malik at 10 years old, grinning with missing front teeth, his hands covered in grease from helping change a tire. Lorraine's arm was around him, sunlight in her smile. For years, Elias had kept that photo buried in a drawer. Now it sat right where it belonged, in the open part of the story, not the ghost of one. Outside, Malik's voice carried through the morning, giving directions to the volunteers setting up for the Foundation's open house. The laughter of kids bounced off the brick walls. Hammering, clanking, the sound of construction. It was music now. Not the kind you dance to, but the kind that built something inside you. Elias smiled. The world hadn't changed overnight, but a small corner of it had bent toward better. He walked out to the garage, watching Malik help a young girl secure her safety goggles before she started sanding a wooden workbench. The girl looked no older than 12. Malik crouched down beside her, speaking softly, guiding her hands until the tool vibrated steady. She looked up at him, smiling, and he smiled back, easy, patient, proud. For the first time in years, Elias saw his son as he'd always hoped to, not the angry boy, not the man who ran from himself, but the bridge between what was broken and what could still be built. When Malik noticed him, he called out, "You're supposed to be taking it easy, old man." Elias chuckled. "Easy's for people who already finished their work." Malik grinned. "You ever think maybe it's done?" Elias shook his head. "Work like this, it's never done. You just pass the wrench to the next hand." They shared a smile, the kind built on peace, not apology. Later that afternoon, reporters from the local paper arrived. They wanted a feature on the Foundation, a story about an ex-soldier turning survival into service. Malik handled most of the talking, explaining the program, the apprenticeship system, the outreach projects for at-risk youth. One reporter, a young black woman with a camera, turned to Elias. "Mr. Carter, after everything you've been through, how would you define freedom?" Elias paused. For a long moment, all he could hear was the sound of drills and laughter behind him. Then he said slowly, Freedom isn't just the right to walk away from chains. It's the strength to build something with the hands that broke them. It's the choice to forgive even when the world keeps asking you not to. The reporter nodded, eyes shining. "That's powerful," she whispered. Elias smiled. "It's just truth." When the crew left the shop, quieted again. Malik leaned against the doorway, arms crossed. "You always got the right words when people are watching." Elias laughed softly. Wisdom sounds smarter when someone else is holding a microphone. They stood together watching the kids sweeping up sawdust, packing away tools. The sun dipped low, flooding the room with amber light. Malik's voice broke the silence. "You think Mom would have been proud?" Elias's answer came without hesitation. "She already is." Malik nodded, jaw tight, then whispered, "Thank you, Dad." "For what?" "For not giving up on me. For teaching me that freedom's not something you steal. It's something you build together." Elias put a hand on his son's shoulder, gripping it firmly. "Then build it right, son, and never forget who you're building it for." As the evening fell, they stepped outside. The city skyline glowed in the distance, lights blinking like a constellation carved by human hands. A faint breeze rolled down the street, carrying laughter from inside the shop. The air smelled of metal sweat and possibility. Elias looked up at the fading sky. For the first time in his life, it didn't feel like something to fight. It felt like something to stand under, free, equal whole. He thought of the woods, the hunger, the note, the fear. Then he thought of Ruth and Isaiah of Pine Hollow, of every unseen hand that had lifted him when he fell. Freedom, he realized, wasn't a prize to win or a burden to carry. It was a covenant passed from the living to the learning, from the forgiven to the forgiving. Behind him, Malik locked the shop door and tossed him the keys. "Tomorrow," he asked. "Tomorrow," Elias said. They walked off down Auburn Avenue together. Two shadows stretched long under the streetlights, moving side by side. And somewhere deep in the heart of Atlanta, the world kept turning. Not gentler, not easier, but truer. Because sometimes the hardest battles aren't fought with fists or guns. They're fought with the courage to stay.